The dog didn't bark. Milo froze over a single floorboard, ears locked forward as if something underneath were still alive. Ray tightened his grip on the rusted iron bar as the wood cracked open. A hollow echo rose from beneath the old ticket booth. Milo stepped back, then forward again, a low growl building in his chest. Cold air seeped through the gap wrong, out of place. Ray paused and listened. Whatever was beneath that floor didn't feel buried. It felt hidden. What do you think is under there? The porch light flickered once, then steadied into a dull yellow glow that flattened everything it touched. Raymond Collins stood just beyond it, where the shadows were thicker. His boots planted on the warped wooden boards like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to stay or move. The duffel bag rested at his feet. Old canvas, faded green. The kind issued decades ago, patched twice along one seam. And it leaned slightly to one side like it knew it wasn't going anywhere tonight. Behind him, the door clicked. Not slammed, not angry. Just final. Ray didn't turn right away. His eyes stayed on the grain of the porch railing, on the thin crack running along the wood where years of winters had split it open. His breathing came slow, measured, the way it had been trained to be when the air felt wrong. Inside something shifted. Footsteps, a muffled voice. Then the soft slide of curtains being pulled closed. That was when he turned. The glass pane in the front door reflected him faintly, an outline more than a man, shoulders squared without thinking, chin slightly tucked, a posture that had never quite left him, even after the uniform had. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the key. And it was the same brass key he'd used for over 30 years, the edges worn smooth where his thumb used to rub it without him noticing. He held it for a second, feeling the weight of it, then stepped forward and slid it into the lock. It didn't go in. Ray paused, tried again, slower this time. The key stopped halfway, catching against something that wasn't supposed to be there. He pulled it out and looked at it, turning it between his fingers like the answer might be etched somewhere along the metal. Then he leaned closer to the door. Different lock. Clean. New. Bright around the edges where it hadn't been weathered yet. He didn't knock. Inside, a television turned on. The volume came up just a little too fast, like someone was trying to cover the sound of everything else. Ray stood there a moment longer, his hand still hovering near the handle, then let it drop. Behind him, a soft shift of weight. Milo. The dog stood just off his right side, close enough that Ray could feel the warmth coming off him even through the cold air. A full-grown German shepherd, broad through the chest, coat dark along the back and lighter around the neck. His ears were forward, eyes fixed on the door. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just watched. Ray glanced down at him. "It's fine," he said, voice low, even. Milo didn't move. Ray turned away from the door first, not quickly, not slowly. Just done. He picked up the duffel with one hand. It was lighter than it should have been, or maybe he just didn't have as much left to carry. The night air pressed in around them as they stepped off the porch. The gravel driveway crunched under his boots. Each step clear, deliberate. No hesitation, no looking back. Halfway to the truck, a car passed at the end of the road. Headlights swept across the yard, cutting sharp white lines through the dark. For a split second, the beam hit him full in the face. Ray flinched. Not much. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But his shoulders tightened, his weight shifting just enough to angle his body sideways. 1 foot, half a step back. Eyes narrowing, scanning the edges of the light as if expecting something to come out of it. Then the car was gone. The darkness closed back in. Ray exhaled slowly, the tension draining out in pieces instead of all at once. His hand adjusted on the duffel strap, tightening his grip. "Just headlights," he muttered. Milo moved closer, brushing lightly against his leg, not pushing, just there. Then they reached the truck. It was an old Ford, paint dulled to a flat gray that barely caught the light anymore. The driver's side door creaked when Ray opened it. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the quiet. He tossed the duffel into the passenger seat, then paused with his hand on the door frame. The house sat behind them. Dark now, except for the faint glow leaking through the edges of the curtains. No movement. No shadows crossing the windows. Nothing. Like he'd never been there at all. Ray reached into his pocket again, fingers brushing against the key before closing around it. He pulled it out, looked at it one last time, then slipped it back into his jacket. He climbed into the truck. Milo jumped in after him without being told, settling into the passenger seat with a practiced ease, turning once before lying down, but his head rested near the edge of the seat, eyes still angled toward the house. Ray started the engine. It coughed once, then turned over, the low rumble filling the silence. The sound vibrated through the steering wheel up into his hands. Familiar. Solid. Something that still responded when he asked it to. He sat there for a second, foot on the brake, headlights cutting across the yard. Then, he shifted into gear. The truck rolled forward, tires crunching over gravel. The beam of light sliding slowly across the porch, the door, the window, where the curtain had been pulled tight. Milo lifted his head as they passed the end of the driveway, watching until the house disappeared behind the trees. Ray didn't look back. The road ahead stretched out, dark and empty, disappearing into the hills beyond town. No streetlights, no traffic, just a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through the night. He drove, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed forward. The porch light behind them flickered once more, then went out. By the time the road curved and the house was gone completely, there was nothing left but the hum of the engine, the soft rhythm of Milo's breathing, and the long, empty stretch of night waiting ahead. Ray adjusted his grip on the wheel, shoulders settling into a posture he hadn't used in years but hadn't forgotten either. No destination, no plan, just movement, and the quiet understanding that whatever came next wasn't going to be inside that house. Not anymore. The road curved out of town without ceremony. One moment there were porches and mailboxes and the low glow of kitchen windows. The next, there was nothing but black tree lines and the narrow ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead. Ray kept the truck steady at 45. No radio. No conversation. Just the hum of the engine and the soft shift of Milo adjusting on the seat. The dog had turned sideways now. One paw hanging slightly over the edge, head lifted just enough to watch the road ahead through the windshield. Not restless, not anxious, just aware. Ray's eyes flicked once toward him, then back to the road. "You good?" he said quietly. Milo's ears twitched, but he didn't move. The road dipped into a shallow valley, and the temperature dropped with it. The windshield fogged slightly at the edges before the defroster pushed it back. Ray adjusted the dial without looking, fingers finding the knob by memory alone. 10 miles out, he turned off onto a gravel shoulder. It wasn't planned. He simply needed a place to stop. The truck rolled to a stop beneath a stand of bare trees, branches creaking faintly overhead. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence pressed in hard, like something physical. For a second, he didn't move. Then he reached forward and turned the key back halfway, just enough to bring the dash lights on. A soft green glow filled the cab. His hand stayed on the wheel. Milo shifted, lifting his head fully now, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the glass. Ray followed the same line instinctively. Tree line, ditch, open field beyond, nothing moving. Still, his gaze lingered, tracing edges, shadows, places where something could be if it wanted to be. Old habit. Didn't go away just because the war did. He leaned back slowly, the seat creaking under his weight. One hand dropped from the wheel and rested on his thigh, fingers tapping once against the denim before going still. The truck ticked as it cooled, metal settling, heat fading out of the engine block. Each small sound sharp in the quiet. Ray closed his eyes. Not to sleep. Just to shut out the distance for a second. A metallic clink somewhere outside snapped them open again. He was upright before he realized he'd moved, hand already reaching across the seat, not for anything in particular, just reaching. Milo was up too, silent, body angled toward the passenger window, ears forward, eyes locked on the dark. Ray didn't speak, didn't need to. They both listened. Another sound, faint, irregular, not footsteps, branches, maybe, wind shifting through the trees. Ray held still for a few seconds longer, breath shallow, controlled, but then slowly, deliberately, he exhaled. "Wind," he muttered. Milo didn't relax right away. Neither did Ray. It took a full minute before his shoulders dropped back against the seat again. He rubbed a hand over his face, dragging it down past his mouth like he was wiping something away. "Hell of a way to spend the night," he said under his breath. He reached across the seat, pulling the duffel closer, then unzipped it halfway. Inside, everything was packed tight. Clothes rolled neat, a small metal case tucked along one side, a flashlight, a worn paperback with the cover bent back at the corners. He didn't take anything out, just checked. Closed it again. Milo lowered himself slowly, but not all the way. His body stayed tense, ready. Ray shifted, pulling his jacket tighter around his shoulders. The cold was creeping in now, slipping through the seams, settling into the cab. He turned the key again, just enough to bring the heater back to life for a few seconds. The engine coughed, then steadied. Warm air pushed out weakly. He let it run for 30 seconds, then shut it off again. Gas wasn't something he could waste. Silence returned. He leaned his head back, eyes open, watching the faint outline of branches against the sky through the windshield. Sleep didn't come. It didn't even try. Instead, the darkness shifted. The windshield wasn't glass anymore. It was dust. Brown, choking dust, kicked up by rotors overhead. The hum of the truck engine twisted into something deeper, louder, thudding, rhythmic, too familiar. Ray's fingers tightened against his thigh. His jaw set. A flash, bright, sharp, cut across his vision. Not light, memory, incoming. The word hit him before the sound did. He was already moving, body dropping, shoulders turning, searching for cover that wasn't there. The seatbelt caught across his chest, jerking him back. The world snapped back to the truck, back to the cold, back to nothing but trees and empty road. Ray sucked in a breath like he'd been underwater too long. His hand was gripping the edge of the seat hard enough his knuckles had gone pale. Milo was pressed against him now, weight solid against his leg, head nudging under his arm. Ray didn't push him away, didn't say anything, just let the contact sit there. His breathing slowed. In, out, again. After a while, he reached down and rested a hand against Milo's neck, fingers sinking into the thick fur. "All right," he said quietly. Milo didn't move. The night stretched on. Almost no more sounds. No more headlights. Just the long, empty hours between one place and whatever came next. Sometime close to dawn, the sky lightened just enough to turn the darkness into shapes again. Ray hadn't slept. His eyes burned, but they were clear. He sat up slowly, rolling his shoulders once, working the stiffness out. "Come on," he said. Milo was already up. The engine turned over on the second try. Ray pulled back onto the road without hesitation. The horizon ahead was pale gray. The first hint of morning pushing through. No destination. Still no plan. But the road was there, and for now, that was enough. The morning came in thin and gray, the kind that didn't warm anything, but still pushed the dark back just enough to see where you were going. Frost clung to the edges of the windshield, like feathered patterns that caught the first light and held it. Ray drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gearshift. His eyes moved constantly. Road, shoulder, tree line, mirrors, never settling too long in one place. Milo sat upright now, alert in a different way than the night before. His nose lifted slightly, catching scents that didn't reach Ray. Every so often, his ears twitched toward something out beyond the truck, then forward again. The highway narrowed as it climbed into higher ground. Fewer signs, fewer houses. Eventually, none at all. By mid-morning, the gas gauge dipped lower than Ray liked. He pulled into a small town without a name on the main road. Just a faded sign at the turnoff that had lost half its letters to weather. A gas station sat at the edge of it, the kind with 2 pumps and a single-story building attached. He rolled to a stop beside the pump. The engine idled for a moment before he shut it off. Silence again, broken only by the distant hum of wind across open land. Ray stepped out, boots crunching lightly on the gravel. The cold was sharper here, cleaner. It cut through the layers without resistance. Milo jumped down beside him, stretching once before standing close. Ray glanced at the pump. Old, mechanical. He pulled the handle, reset it, and began filling the tank. The numbers ticked upward slowly. He didn't watch them. Instead, his eyes scanned the area. The building, windows, reflections, movement inside. Nothing. Just an empty counter and a coffee machine sitting cold behind it. When the tank was half full, he stopped. Enough. Inside, only the bell above the door gave a weak chime when he stepped in. The air smelled like stale coffee and motor oil. A woman sat behind the counter, mid-50s. reading glasses low on her nose. She looked up once, then again, taking him in more carefully the second time. "You passing through?" she asked. Ray nodded. "Yeah." Her eyes flicked to Milo, then back to Ray. "Dog-friendly around here," she said, almost as an afterthought. Ray didn't respond. He moved to the coffee machine, poured what was left into a paper cup. The coffee came out thin and lukewarm. He drank it anyway. On a corkboard near the door, a cluster of papers was pinned in uneven rows. Notices, ads, lost pets, equipment for sale. One sheet stood out, white, clean, recently posted. Ray stepped closer, cup still in hand. County surplus auction, a list of properties, and most of it meant nothing. Old barns, storage sheds, land parcels. Then one line caught his eye. Former railway depot, decommissioned, demolition pending, $10. Ray read it once, then again. The paper shifted slightly in the draft from the door behind him. "Been sitting empty for decades," the woman said from the counter. "County's trying to clear it out before spring." Ray didn't look back. "Where?" "A couple hours north, out past the ridge. Not much out there." She paused. "No power, no water. Roof's probably half gone." Ray's eyes stayed on the line. $10. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the folded bills inside. He didn't take them out yet. "Anyone buying it?" he asked. The woman gave a short, quiet laugh. "Not likely. Place isn't worth the trouble." Ray nodded once. That seemed to settle something, and he set the empty cup down, turned, and walked back to the counter. "I'll take the address." The woman studied him for a second, then reached under the counter and pulled out a small notepad. She wrote it down in neat, deliberate strokes, tore the page free, and slid it across. "You sure?" she said. Ray picked up the paper, folded it once. Yeah, outside, the wind had picked up. Milo was already waiting by the truck, watching the road. Ray climbed in, unfolded the paper, and set it on the dashboard. The address meant nothing to him. Just another point on a map. But it was something. He started the engine. The truck pulled back onto the road, heading north now, away from anything familiar. The land changed slowly. Trees thinned. Hills rose. The road narrowed again, but winding through stretches of open ground where the wind moved unbroken. By early afternoon, the paved road ended. Gravel took over. Ray slowed slightly, adjusting to the loose surface, hands steady on the wheel. The truck rattled. Every bump transmitted up through the frame. Milo leaned forward, bracing himself. Eyes fixed ahead. The address led them to a small county office. One building, faded paint, a flagpole out front with a flag hanging limp in the cold air. Ray parked. Inside, the place was quiet. A desk, filing cabinets, a single man behind the counter, older, hair gone mostly gray. He looked up as Ray entered. "Can I help you?" Ray set the folded paper on the counter. "Depot." The man glanced at it, then back at Ray. "You hear about that?" "Yeah." The man leaned back slightly, still studying him the same way the woman at the gas station had, taking in the jacket, the posture, the dog waiting just outside the door. "You know what it is?" he asked. "Abandoned," Ray said. The man nodded slowly. "More than that. Forgotten. Roof's gone over part of it. Floor might not hold in places." He tapped the paper. No utilities, no services, no reason to be there. Ray didn't respond. The man opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and set it on the counter. $10, he said. "That's the county fee. You sign, it's yours. No guarantees, no refunds." Ray reached into his pocket. He pulled out the folded bills, smoothed them once against the counter, set them down. The man looked at the money, then at Ray again. There was a pause, just long enough to matter. Then he took the bills. "All right," he said quietly. He turned the folder around, opened it, and pointed to a line. "Sign there." Ray picked up the pen. His hand hovered for a fraction of a second. Then he wrote, "Raymond Collins." The letters came out clean, straight, no hesitation. The man stamped the paper with a heavy metal seal. The sound echoed through the room, flat and final. "That's it," he said. You own it. He slid a small key across the counter. Old, iron, cold. Ray picked it up, turning it once between his fingers, different from the one in his pocket, different from the one that hadn't worked. Outside, Milo shifted his weight, watching through the glass. Ray closed his hand around the key. Where is it? He asked. The man gave him directions. Simple, straight. Last mile's rough, he added. You'll see it when you see it. Ray nodded once. That was enough. He turned, pushed the door open, and stepped back into the cold. Milo fell in beside him immediately. No questions, no hesitation. They got into the truck. Ray placed the key on the dashboard, next to the folded address. The engine turned over. The truck rolled forward. Behind them, the county office shrank into the distance. Ahead, the road climbed into the hills, and somewhere beyond that, a place no one wanted, a place no one needed, a place that, for $10, was his. The road narrowed until it barely deserved the name. Loose gravel gave way to packed dirt, then to something in between. Two worn tire tracks cutting through scrub and dry grass. The truck bounced harder now, the suspension complaining with every dip. Ray didn't slow more than necessary. Hands steady, eyes moving. Tree line to the left, open slope to the right. No structures, no fences, no sign of anyone. Milo had shifted forward again, standing with his front paws braced against the edge of the seat, nose lifted slightly toward the windshield. His ears flicked once, then locked forward. Ray noticed. Yeah, he murmured. I see it. He didn't yet, but he trusted the pattern. The road bent around a rise, then dipped sharply into a shallow basin, and there it was. The depot sat alone in the middle of it, like something that had been placed there and then forgotten. Weathered wood, once painted a deep red, now faded to a dull, uneven brown. The roof sagged slightly along one side. A section near the back collapsed inward where beams had given up years ago. A narrow platform ran along the front, boards warped and gray with age. No tracks. Just a long strip of bare ground where they used to be, stretching out in both directions before disappearing into brush. Ray eased off the gas. The truck rolled the last 50 yards in silence. He stopped short of the platform. Engine idling. Milo was already staring at the building, body still, muscles tight under his coat. Ray didn't get out right away. He let the engine run, scanning. Windows, most of them boarded. One broken, jagged edges catching the light. Door, front entrance, slightly off-center, no visible damage. Surroundings, open ground for 20 yards, then trees. No movement, no sound, except the wind moving through the basin, low and constant. Ray shut the engine off. Silence settled in. He opened the door slowly, stepping out without slamming it. Boots hit the dirt with a soft thud. Milo jumped down beside him, landing lightly despite his size. Ray didn't head straight for the building. He circled first. Wide arc, 30 feet out, eyes tracking the perimeter. Ground disturbances, footprints, drag marks, nothing fresh. The dirt was hard, undisturbed, except for wind patterns and old impressions that had long since lost their shape. He moved closer. 10 feet now. Closer still. Milo stayed slightly ahead, pausing every few steps, glancing back once as if checking for permission. Ray gave a small nod. The dog moved on. They reached the platform. Ray tested the first step with his weight before committing. The wood creaked but held. He shifted fully onto it, each step measured, listening to the response under his boots. No sudden give. No hollow echo. Milo followed, lighter, quieter. The front door stood closed. A rusted padlock hanging from a loop near the handle. Ray reached into his pocket, pulled out the iron key. He turned it once between his fingers, then stepped closer. The lock resisted at first, metal grinding against metal. He adjusted his grip, applied steady pressure. It gave with a sharp click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Ray paused, listened. Nothing answered. He pulled the lock free, set it aside on the platform and pushed the door open. The hinges groaned. Inside the air was colder, still. Dust hung in the light that slipped through cracks and broken boards, drifting slowly like it had nowhere else to go. Ray didn't step in immediately. He stood in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust, scanning the interior the same way he'd scanned the outside. One room. Long. Wood bench along one wall. Counter at the far end. Ticket booth. A pot-belly stove sat near the corner, pipe running up through the ceiling, blackened with age. No movement. No sound. He stepped inside. The floor held. Each footfall produced a dull, muted creak, but nothing shifted under his weight. Milo entered behind him, moving slower now, nose low to the ground. He traced a line along the edge of the room, pausing at corners, sniffing at gaps where the wall met the floor. Ray moved in the opposite direction. Cross-check. He reached the far wall, turned, and took in the full length of the room again. No hidden doors, no immediate threats, just emptiness. He set his hand briefly on the back of the bench. Cold wood. Solid. Clear, he said under his breath. The word slipped out before he could stop it. Milo's ears twitched at the sound, but he didn't react otherwise. Ray moved toward the ticket booth. The small door was ajar, hanging slightly off-center. He pushed it open with 2 fingers, careful not to disturb more than necessary. Inside, the space was tight. A narrow desk beneath the bay window that looked out toward where the tracks used to be. Shelves lined the back wall, most of them empty. A stool sat tucked under the desk. Ray stepped in halfway, leaning slightly to check angles he couldn't see from the doorway. Nothing. He stepped back out. Milo had stopped near the center of the room, standing still, head tilted slightly. Ray watched him. The dog wasn't looking at the door or the windows. He was staring at the floor. Same spot. Unmoving. Ray's eyes followed the line. Wood planks, minus a section near the base of the booth. Nothing obvious. He walked over. Boots slow, measured. Milo didn't move as he approached, just shifted his weight slightly, stepping aside enough to give Ray space without breaking his focus. Ray crouched, ran his hand along the boards. Cold, dry, uneven, in places from age. But one section, different, subtle, color slightly off. Grain running at a slightly different angle. Ray pressed down, solid. He tapped it lightly with his knuckles. Dull sound. Same as the others. He sat back on his heels. Looked at Milo. The dog held his gaze for a second, then looked back at the floor. Persistent, focused. Ray exhaled slowly. Later, he said. Milo didn't argue, but he didn't look away either. Ray stood, moving back toward the center of the room. The light had shifted, stretching longer shadows across the floor. The wind outside picked up, rattling something loose along the back of the building. Ray turned his head instinctively, tracking the sound. His body angled toward it before his mind caught up. Old reflex. Still there. He walked to the rear door. Checked it. Locked from the inside. Good. He moved back to the front, stepped out onto the platform again. The basin was empty. Still. Silent. Ray stood there for a moment, taking it in. No neighbors, no traffic, no noise except the wind. He glanced back inside, at the bench, the stove, the booth, at Milo, still standing over that same section of floor, as if waiting for something. Ray stepped back in, closed the door behind him. The latch clicked into place. Inside, the silence deepened. He set the duffel down near the bench, rolled his shoulders once, then again. The movement loosened something that had been tight since the night before. Not much. Just enough. Milo finally lay down, but not fully. Front paws stretched forward, head resting just above them, eyes still on that spot, Ray noticed. Of course he did. He looked at the floor again, then at the dog, then back at the room. Later, he repeated quietly. Outside, the wind moved across the empty railbed. Inside, the depot held its silence, waiting. The light shifted slowly across the floor as the afternoon leaned toward evening. It slipped through the broken window near the back, stretched thin across the boards, and settled in long, pale strips that made every crack and knot in the wood stand out sharper. Ray moved through the space without hurry. Then he set the duffel near the bench and opened it, pulling out what he needed with the kind of efficiency that came from years of not carrying anything unnecessary. A folded blanket, a small metal tin, a flashlight. each item placed within reach, not scattered, not wasted. Milo hadn't moved far, still near the same spot, still watching the same section of floor. Ray noticed it again when he straightened up. "You pick your ground, huh?" he said quietly. No answer. Just that steady focus. Ray crossed the room, crouched once more, and ran his hand over the boards. The same difference. Subtle, but there, enough to register. He pressed down harder this time. Nothing gave. He tapped again, knuckles against wood. Same dull sound. He leaned closer, bringing his ear near the floor, listening for anything beneath. Nothing. Just the hollow quiet of a place that hadn't been disturbed in years. Ray sat back on his heels. "Not today," he muttered. He stood and stepped away. Milo didn't follow. The dog shifted once, adjusting his position, then lay back down exactly where he had been before. Front paws framing that patch of wood, like he was guarding it. Ray, let it go for now. Outside, the wind picked up as the sun dropped lower, the air growing sharper with it. The temperature inside the depot followed, seeping through the walls, settling into the floorboards. Ray moved to the potbelly stove. He opened the small iron door. Empty. He crouched, checked the flue pipe. Clear enough. No recent use. No soot buildup beyond what had been there for years. He stepped back out, scanning the area around the depot. Dry brush, fallen limbs, dead wood. Ray gathered what he could find within a short radius, moving quickly, but not carelessly, always keeping the building in sight. He didn't stray beyond the open ground. Not yet. Back inside, he stacked the wood beside the stove, built the fire small, controlled. A few strips of old newspaper from the duffel, a match struck against the side of the tin. Flame caught. Slow at first, then steady. The heat came gradually, pushing back the cold in a tight circle around the stove. Shadows shifted again, softer now, less sharp. Milo lifted his head briefly at the crackle of the fire, then lowered it again, eyes drifting but not away from the floor. Ray sat on the bench. The wood creaked under his weight, but held. He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees, hands hanging loose. For a while, he just watched the fire and listened to it. The small sounds, wood splitting, air pulling through the flue, were steady, predictable, nothing like the random noise of the outside world. His shoulders loosened slightly. Not much, just enough. The light faded completely, leaving the room lit only by the fire and the faint gray of the sky through the broken window. Night came in fast here. No streetlights, no distant glow, just darkness pressing in from every side. Ray stood and moved to the door, checking it again before sliding the latch into place. Then to the rear door. Same process. Same quiet confirmation. He turned once more, scanning the room. Angles, corners, lines of sight, everything accounted for. He stepped back to the bench and sat again. Milo shifted, not toward him, toward the floor as a low sound rolled up from the dog's chest, barely a growl, more a vibration than a warning. Ray's head snapped up. "Hey," he said softly. Milo didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on that same spot. The growl deepened slightly. Not loud, not aggressive, focused. Ray stood, moved toward him, each step slow, measured. He stopped just behind the dog, following the line of Milo's gaze down to the floor. Nothing had changed. Same boards, same color difference, same stillness. Ray crouched again. "Easy," he murmured. Milo's body was tense now, muscles coiled, but held in check. He didn't lunge, didn't paw, just held. Ray reached out, placed a hand lightly on the dog's neck, felt the tension there, alive, alert. Not fear, something else. Ray shifted his weight, bringing his face closer to the boards again, and listening. At first, nothing. Then, a sound, faint. So faint it could have been imagined. A soft, irregular tick. Not mechanical, not steady, just something. Ray froze. The fire cracked behind him. A sudden, sharp pop that echoed louder than it should have. Milo flinched, then steadied again, eyes never leaving the spot. Ray stayed still for another few seconds. Then slowly, very slowly, he leaned back. The sound didn't repeat. He exhaled. "Old wood," he said under his breath, "just shifting." But the words didn't sit right. Milo didn't move, didn't accept it. Ray stood, pulling his hand away. "Enough," he said, firmer this time. He stepped back, gave the dog space. Milo hesitated, then slowly, he lowered himself again. But he didn't relax, not fully. His head stayed up, eyes half-lidded but fixed, watching, guarding. Ray returned to the bench, sat. The fire burned lower now, the warmth shrinking with it. Outside, the wind moved across the empty basin, carrying with it a sound that almost resembled distant voices, but never quite formed into anything real. Ray leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes. Just for a second, the darkness behind his eyelids shifted. Shapes, movement, a flicker of light that wasn't fire, a sound, sharp, metallic, cut through the memory before it could fully form. Ray's eyes snapped open. He was already moving, half rising from the bench, hand reaching again for something that wasn't there. The depot came back into focus. Fire, bench, Milo, still in the same spot, still watching. Ray held himself there for a moment, then slowly sat back down. His breathing evened out again, one controlled inhale at a time. "Yeah," he muttered. "I heard it too." Milo's ear flicked. The night stretched on. No more sounds, no more movement, just the quiet, and that one spot on the floor that refused to be forgotten. The fire burned down to a low bed of coals, the glow soft and steady, barely holding the cold back from the edges of the room. Shadows thickened in the corners, stretching longer, deeper, until the walls seemed farther away than they were. Ray didn't sleep. He shifted once on the bench, adjusting his back against the wall, but his eyes stayed open. Every few minutes they moved. Door, window, stove, Milo, the floor, always the floor. Milo hadn't changed position. Front paws forward, head raised, eyes fixed, waiting. The wind outside dropped for a moment, and with it the noise. But the silence that followed was different, thinner, like something had stepped into it. Ray felt it before he heard anything. A tightening in his chest, a shift in the air. His hand moved. Slow. Controlled. Resting against the bench beside him. As he leaned forward just enough to listen. There. A faint crunch. Not wood, not the building. Outside. Milo's ears snapped forward. No growl this time. Just stillness. Ray didn't speak, didn't move too fast. He reached down, fingers closing around the flashlight from the duffel, but he didn't turn it on. Light was a signal, and right now he wasn't ready to give one. Another sound, closer, footsteps, measured, not wandering, deliberate. Ray stood, quiet, weight shifting without a sound from bench to floor. He moved toward the door, staying just off center, his body angled so he wouldn't be framed if someone looked through the cracks. Milo rose with him. Silent. Staying low. Ray placed one hand lightly against the door, feeling for vibration. Nothing. But the footsteps were there. Circling. Not random. They stopped. Right outside. Ray's breathing slowed. He leaned slightly, bringing his eye to the narrow gap where the door didn't quite meet the frame. Darkness. Shapes. Two figures. Close enough now that he could make out outlines. One taller. One shorter. Both moving with purpose. Not lost. Not passing through, looking. The shorter one crouched near the platform, running a hand along the boards. The taller one scanned the area, turning slowly, checking the tree line. Ray pulled back. His jaw tightened. Milo shifted slightly, a low vibration building again in his chest. Ray's hand dropped to the dog's neck. "Hold," he whispered. Milo froze. The word landed. Outside, a beam of light flicked on. Flashlight. It swept across the platform, then toward the door, the beam cutting through the gaps in thin lines. Ray didn't flinch, didn't step back. He held his position just out of the direct angle, letting the light pass. The beam moved on. Back to the boards. The crouched figure tapped something. A dull knock. Then another. Ray's eyes flicked inside. The same spot. The floor. Milo's muscles tensed under his hand. Ray felt it. understood it. Someone else knew. The taller figure spoke, voice low, too muffled to make out the words. But the tone carried enough, focused, impatient. The crouched one stood. The light beam shifted again, sweeping wider now brushing across the windows, the walls, the roofline. Ray stayed still. Counted. 1, 2, 3. The footsteps moved again, this time away from the door, circling the building. Ray waited, listened. The sound moved along the side wall, toward the back. He stepped away from the door, moving quickly, but controlled toward the rear of the depot. Milo followed without command. They reached the back wall, just as the footsteps stopped again. Closer now. On the other side, Ray positioned himself beside the rear door, body angled, hand hovering near the latch. If it opened, he didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The handle shifted, just slightly, tested. Ray's hand tightened. The latch held. The handle moved again, harder, then stopped. Silence, a long pause. Ray held his breath without realizing it. And then the footsteps retreated. Slow at first, then faster, moving away from the building, back toward the front. Ray stayed in place, counting again. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. The wind returned, carrying the sound away until there was nothing left but the empty noise of the basin. Ray didn't move right away. He waited. Long enough for the silence to settle back into its old shape. Then he stepped away from the door. Milo stayed close. They moved back toward the center of the room. The fire was almost out now, just a faint glow. Ray crouched near it, adding a small piece of wood, enough to bring the flame back without lighting the room too bright. The light flickered, soft, controlled. He sat back on his heels, looked at the floor, then at Milo, then back again. They knew, he said quietly. Milo didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. Ray stood, walked to the front door, opened it just enough to step out onto the platform. The night air hit cold and sharp. He scanned the ground. Footprints. Fresh. 2 sets. Boots. Not local. Too clean. Too straight. He followed them with his eyes as far as he could before they disappeared into the darker ground beyond. No vehicle. No engine sound. They'd come in quiet. Left the same way. Ray stepped back inside and closed the door. The latch clicked into place. This time the sound felt different. He crossed the room again, stopping over the spot. The boards didn't look any different, didn't feel any different. But now they weren't just old wood. They were something someone else had come for. Ray stood there a moment longer. Then he turned away and moved back to the bench. Saturday, his posture changed slightly, not relaxed, not anymore. Set, focused, the kind that didn't belong to a man just trying to find a place to sleep. The kind that belonged to someone who understood what it meant when something was worth coming back for. Milo lay down beside him, not stretched out, not resting, waiting. The depot was quiet again, but it wasn't empty anymore, not the way it had been before. Now it was a place someone had tried to enter, a place someone had searched, and a place though they would come back to. The rest of the night didn't move forward so much as it stretched. Ray didn't try to sleep again. He sat on the bench with his back to the wall, eyes open, tracking the slow burn of the fire until it collapsed into ash. Every sound outside felt closer now, and every shift of wind carried more weight than it had before. Milo never fully settled. He lay down, but not flat. His head stayed up, angled toward the center of the room, ears catching things Ray couldn't hear yet. Every so often his nose twitched, pulling in air that carried more information than sight ever could. Ray watched him more than the room now. That was the difference. Before he had trusted the space. Now he trusted the dog. Sometime near dawn the sky lightened just enough to soften the edges of the darkness. The cold crept in harder with the fading fire, pushing Ray to his feet. He moved without hesitation. First the door. Opened just a fraction, checked the outside. Empty. Then the perimeter again, boots tracing the same arc from the day before. The footprints were still there, clearer now in the pale light. Two men, the same size as he remembered. They hadn't been wandering. They had been focused. Ray crouched near one of the impressions, brushing a finger along the edge. The soil hadn't been disturbed beyond that. No extra movement, no circling. They had come for one thing and left when they didn't get it. He stood, turned back toward the depot. Milo was already at the doorway, waiting. Ray stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The light from outside filled the room now, revealing everything in sharper detail. The cracks in the boards, the worn edges of the bench, the dust that hadn't moved in years, except for the marks where they had stepped the night before. Ray walked straight to the center of the room, to that spot. Milo was already there, standing over it. Not growling, not tense, just certain. Ray didn't speak this time, but he crouched immediately, both hands running over the boards with more intent. He pressed harder, checked the seams, followed the grain line where the color shifted. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. The boards weren't just aged differently. They had been replaced. Clean cuts along the edges, slightly tighter fit than the surrounding planks. Ray leaned closer, running his fingertip along the seam. There. A gap. Small, precise. Not from wear, from design. He sat back slowly, eyes narrowing. Milo shifted, stepping back just enough to give him space, but his focus never broke. Ray stood, turned, walked to the corner where he had stacked the wood the day before. He sifted through it, pushing aside lighter pieces until he found something solid, a length of old iron bent slightly at one end, probably part of something that had broken off years ago. He tested the weight. Good enough. Back at the spot, he dropped to one knee and positioned the iron against the edge of the board. He didn't rush. Set the angle. Adjusted. Then applied pressure. The wood didn't move at first, just a dull resistance like it had been part of the floor forever. Ray shifted his grip, pressed harder. The iron bit into the seam. A sharp crack split the silence. The board lifted just slightly, but enough. Milo stepped back another inch, watching. Ray slid the iron deeper, using the leverage now, pulling upward in slow, controlled motion. The section of flooring rose together, not separate boards, one piece, a panel. It creaked as it came up, the hinges beneath stiff from disuse, but still holding. Ray stopped halfway and listened. Nothing. No sound from outside. No movement, just the quiet. He lifted the panel fully. Beneath it, a hollow space, boxed in, deliberate. The wood inside was darker, sealed tighter than the floor above. And in the center of it, a metal box, rectangular, old edges worn, but intact. Next to it, a folded flag, tight, precise, triangular. Ray froze. For a second, the room disappeared. Not completely. Just enough. The shape of the flag pulled something forward from somewhere he didn't go anymore. Rows of them, lined up, each one folded the same way, each one meaning the same thing. Milo shifted slightly, breaking the moment. Ray blinked. The depot came back. The cold, the dust, the box. He reached down slowly, lifting the flag first. Careful, both hands. It had weight to it. Not just cloth, but something held in the way it had been folded. Time. Meaning. Memory. He set it gently on the floor beside him, then turned to the box. His fingers hovered for a moment above the metal lid before settling onto it. Cold. Solid. Real. He lifted it. Heavier than it looked. Not empty. He set it beside the flag, then reached back into the compartment. There was more. An envelope. Thick paper, yellowed with age. Handwritten. To whoever finds this. Ray stared at the words. The handwriting was steady, clean, the kind that came from repetition, discipline. He picked it up, held it for a second, then placed it on top of the box. Milo stepped closer now, nose dipping toward the open space, then back to Ray. Ray exhaled slowly. His hand moved to the edge of the panel. He hesitated, not because he was unsure, but because once he opened that box, whatever was inside it would change the shape of everything that had led him here. The night, the footsteps, The reason two men had walked into the dark looking for this exact spot. Ray glanced at Milo. The dog met his eyes. Still, steady, waiting. Ray nodded once, more to himself than anything else. Then he reached for the lid and lifted. The hinges didn't creak. That was the first thing Ray noticed. For something that had been sealed beneath the floor for decades, the movement was smooth, almost maintained. The lid opened halfway before he stopped, waited, listened. Nothing outside. No footsteps. No wind pushing at the walls. Just the faint shift of dust settling in the light. He opened it the rest of the way. Inside were bundles, neatly stacked, with paper bands wrapped tight around old bills, the edges worn but intact. The color was different from what circulated now. Duller, heavier somehow, like it had weight beyond the paper. Ray didn't touch them. Not yet. He just looked. Let his eyes move over the contents without reacting. Money, a lot of it. But not new, not recent. Old currency, organized, intentional. Beneath the stacks, something else. A leather pouch, dark, cracked with age but still holding its shape. Ray reached in and lifted it out. He loosened the tie and opened it carefully. Inside, coins, silver, each one wrapped in thin yellowed paper. He unwrapped one. $1, old mint, heavy in his hand. He turned it once, then set it aside. At the bottom of the pouch, a watch, pocket-sized, metal casing worn smooth from years of handling. But Ray's fingers paused when they touched it. He knew the shape. Didn't need to see the face. He lifted it slowly. The weight settled into his palm like something familiar. He pressed the latch. The cover clicked open. The glass inside was clean. The hand still. Stopped at a time that didn't mean anything yet. Ray stared at it, longer than the money. Longer than the coins. The watch felt different, not valuable. Not in the way the rest of it was, but important. Milo shifted closer, nose brushing lightly against Ray's elbow. Ray exhaled, closed the watch, set it beside the box. His attention moved to the envelope. He picked it up again, turned it over. The paper was thick, edges slightly curled, but the writing held. To whoever finds this, no name, no date on the outside. Just that. As Ray slid a finger under the flap, it gave easily. Inside a single folded sheet. He pulled it out, unfolded it once, twice. The ink had faded to a soft brown, but the lines were clear, careful handwriting, consistent. The kind of script that came from years of writing the same way every day. Ray read, silently. The room didn't move while he did. Even the dust seemed to hold still. Milo lay down beside him, head resting on his paws now, but his eyes stayed on Ray's face, tracking every shift. Ray's expression didn't change much, but something in the way his shoulders settled did. The letter was short, no wasted words, no explanations that didn't matter, just facts. And something beneath them. A man named Thomas Hale, stationed there after the war. Not by assignment, by choice. The depot had been empty even then. He had stayed anyway. Watched the rails that no longer carried anything. Listened to the silence. Saved what he could. Didn't trust banks. Didn't trust people. Not after what he'd seen. Ray's eyes moved slower over the next lines. I don't know who you are, but if you're reading this, you found the only place I ever felt like the noise stopped. Ray stopped there. The words didn't blur, didn't shake. They simply sat on the page, heavy and familiar in a way that needed no explanation. For the first time, Thomas Hale no longer felt like a stranger from another generation. He felt like a man who had once stood at the same edge Ray was standing on now. He read the rest. Simple instructions. Take what's here. Keep the flag folded. Don't waste it. The last line, if you understand why this place matters, then it was meant to be you. Ray lowered the paper. He didn't speak. Didn't move right away. The fire behind him had burned down to embers again. The light soft and uneven, casting shadows that shifted across the walls. Milo lifted his head slightly, watching him. Ray looked at the flag. Still folded, still exact. He reached out and picked it up again. Held it in both hands. The fabric was older than anything else in the room, but it hadn't been treated carelessly. The folds were sharp, maintained, respected. Ray adjusted his grip slightly, careful not to disturb it. He set it on the bench beside him instead of the floor, higher, out of the dust. Then he looked back at the box, at the money, at the watch, at the letter in his hand. None of it felt like a windfall. None of it felt like luck. It felt passed down, not through family, not through blood, through something else. Milo shifted again, this time resting his head against Ray's leg. And the weight was steady, grounding. Ray reached down without thinking, fingers brushing through the dog's fur once. "Yeah," he said quietly. The word didn't carry far. It didn't need to. He folded the letter carefully along its original creases, placed it back in the envelope, set it beside the watch. Then he looked at the open compartment in the floor, at the space that had been hidden for years. At the reason those men had come in the night. His posture changed again, subtle, but clear. This wasn't something he had stumbled into. It was something that had been left, and something others were already looking for. Ray reached for the panel, lowered it halfway, stopped. His eyes moved to the door, then to the windows, then back to the floor. He closed the compartment fully, pressed the boards back into place, and they fit tight, clean. Like they had never been moved. Milo stood, walked back over. Saturday, directly on top of it, guarding. Ray watched him for a second, then nodded once. Good. He gathered the box, the envelope, the watch, moved them to the bench, out of sight from the center of the room. Not hidden, but not exposed. The light outside had shifted again, late afternoon now. Time had passed without him noticing. Ray stood near the door, looking out over the empty basin. The wind had picked up again, moving the grass in long waves. Nothing else moved. But the silence felt different now. Not empty. Not untouched. Held. Like something had been found, and something else had begun. The light drained out of the basin faster than it had the night before. Cloud cover rolled in low, flattening the sky into a dull sheet of gray that swallowed the last of the sun without ceremony. By the time Ray stepped away from the doorway, the depot had already slipped into shadow again. He didn't waste time. The box stayed closed on the bench, pushed back just far enough that it wouldn't catch the eye from the center of the room. The envelope sat on top of it, the watch beside it. The flag carefully folded, rested a little higher away from everything else. Not hidden, but not obvious. Ray moved through the depot with a different rhythm now, less tentative, more deliberate. He checked the doors again, then the windows, adjusting a loose board near the broken pane so it angled inward instead of out. Less light escaping that way, less signal. Milo followed every movement, not underfoot, not in the way, just present. When Ray crossed the room, Milo crossed too, always ending up a few feet behind or beside him, never losing track of his position. Outside, the wind carried a sharper edge now, the kind that came ahead of colder air. Ray stepped onto the platform one last time before full dark. He crouched near the edge, studying the ground where the footprints had been. Still there, but less defined now. Wind had started to soften the edges, time working against whoever had come before. Ray straightened slowly, eyes lifted. Tree line, open ground, no movement, but the feeling from earlier it hadn't left. He stepped back inside and closed the door. The latch clicked. Final. Milo settled near the center again. Not on the spot this time. Near it. Close enough. Watching. Ray sat on the bench, leaning forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. The fire was small again, just enough to hold the cold back in a tight circle. His eyes moved across the room. Every angle, every shadow, waiting. The first sound came just after full dark. Not loud, not sudden, a faint crunch. Farther out this time, Ray didn't move, didn't even turn his head. He let the sound come to him. Listened, another step, then another, closer. Milo's head lifted, ears forward, body still. Ray reached down slowly, fingers brushing the dog's neck. Hold, he whispered. Milo froze. The footsteps didn't circle this time. They came straight in, direct, confident. Ray stood, moved off the bench without a sound, positioned himself just to the side of the door again, out of the line of sight from the cracks. The beam of a flashlight cut across the platform, now sharper this time, more controlled. It paused on the door, then shifted lower, toward the boards. The exact spot from earlier, Ray's jaw tightened. They remember, he murmured under his breath. The handle moved, harder than before, tested. The latch held. A low voice outside. Clearer this time. Someone's in there. Ray didn't react. Didn't answer. Didn't shift. The beam of light flicked off. Darkness pressed in again. Then, a dull thud against the door. Not a full hit. More like a test. Another voice, one sharper. Don't. Not yet. A pause. The air held. Then footsteps moved away from the door. Not leaving. Repositioning. Ray stepped back from the wall, motioned once with his hand. Milo moved instantly. Low. Silent. They crossed the room together, angling toward the back. The rear door. Ray positioned himself beside it again, hand hovering near the latch. The footsteps came around the side of the building. Faster this time. Less careful. They stopped just outside the back wall. A scrape of metal. Something dragged lightly against wood. Ray's eyes flicked toward the floor, then back to the door. "They're trying the other side," he whispered. Milo's muscles coiled. The handle jerked once, twice, harder. The wood around the frame creaked. Ray didn't wait. He reached for the latch, lifted it quietly, stepped back. The door swung inward just enough to break the seal, and a figure stumbled forward into the space. Ray moved, fast, one step. Shoulder turned. He drove into the man's center of mass, redirecting momentum, sending him off balance. The man hit the floor hard. Then a second figure appeared in the doorway, light flashing back on. Milo launched. No hesitation. No command. He hit the second man low, jaws clamping onto the arm holding the light. The beam spun wildly, cutting across walls, ceiling, floor in chaotic bursts. "Get him off," the man shouted. Ray didn't look back. He had the first man pinned, one knee across his chest, one hand locking the wrist that reached for something at his hip. A blade. Small. Folded. Ray twisted. The man gasped, grip loosening. The knife dropped. Milo growled deep, raw, holding his position. The second man struggled, trying to pull free, but Milo held fast. Then a flash. Steel. The man swung blindly. Milo yelped, sharp, high. The sound cut through the room like a crack. Ray's head snapped up. "Milo!" The dog released immediately, backing off, but not retreating far. Blood, dark against his fur. The second man stumbled back, clutching his arm, then turned and bolted into the dark. The first man followed, scrambling to his feet, slipping once before regaining balance and disappearing after him. Silence hit hard. Sudden, absolute. Ray was already moving, across the room, dropping to one knee beside Milo. "Let me see," he said, voice low but tight. Milo stood still, breathing heavy but steady. Ray's hands moved through the fur, searching. There, a cut along the shoulder. Not deep, but enough. Blood seeped through the coat, warm against Ray's fingers. "Damn it," he muttered. Milo didn't pull away, didn't whine again. Just stood there, holding. Ray exhaled once. Sharp. Controlled. Then he moved. Fast now. Back to the duffel. The metal kit came out and opened with practiced motion. Gauze, antiseptic, needle, thread. Everything laid out in seconds. "Stay with me," he said quietly. Milo lowered himself to the floor. Milo kept his head up, eyes on Ray. The same look he'd had earlier. Trust. Ray worked. Hands steady, despite the tremor that tried to creep in. He cleaned the wound first. Milo flinched once, then held. No sound. "Good," Ray murmured. "That's good." He stitched carefully, each motion precise, muscle memory taking over where thought didn't need to. The depot was quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet. Not anymore. Ray tied off the final stitch, pressed gauze into place. His hand rested there for a second longer than necessary. "Stay," he said. Milo didn't move. Ray leaned back slightly, breath leaving him slow. His eyes lifted, turned to the door, still open. To the dark beyond it, empty, but not safe. Not yet. He stood, walked to the door, closed it, latched it, then turned back. Milo lay on the floor, head resting low now, eyes still open, watching. Ray looked at him, then at the floor, then at the bench, the box, the letter, the reason they had come. They'll be back, he said quietly. Milo didn't answer. Didn't need to. Ray stepped closer, sat back down on the bench. His posture had changed again. No more uncertainty. No more waiting to see what this place was. Now he knew. And whatever had been left here wasn't just his to find. It was his to defend. The night didn't end after that. It simply changed shape. A moment later, Ray rose again and stood in the center of the depot, listening, letting the echo of what had just happened settle into something he could measure. Outside, nothing. No retreating footsteps. No engine. No voices. Just wind again brushing low across the basin like nothing had ever disturbed it. Ray didn't trust it. He moved first to Milo, dropped to one knee beside him. The dog lay where he had settled, chest rising steady, eyes open but calmer now. The gauze held in place, darkening slowly where the blood had worked through. Ray's hand hovered for a second, before pressing lightly against the bandage. "Easy," he murmured. Milo's ear flicked. No pull away, no tension, just a quiet acknowledgement. Ray nodded once, then he stood and crossed to the door again, opened it just enough to slip outside. The cold hit harder this time. Sharper. The kind that woke everything up, whether you wanted it to or not. He stepped onto the platform and scanned. Ground. Tree line. Horizon. Nothing. But he crouched anyway. Checked the dirt again. Fresh disturbances now. Boot prints overlapping the old ones. A scuffle near the back corner. One deeper impression where someone had pushed off hard to run. Ray followed the line out as far as he could. They had left fast. Not organized. Not careful. That told him enough. He stood. Turned once more, taking in the full perimeter. Then went back inside. The door closed, latched. This time, he didn't move away from it right away. He leaned his weight into it briefly, feeling the wood, the frame, the resistance, testing. It would hold for now, but not forever. Ray stepped back and looked around the depot again, really looked this time. Not as shelter. Not as a place to pass through. As ground. The bench. Solid enough for rest, but positioned too far from the door. The stove. Good for heat. Bad for light discipline. The windows, weak points. The floor, now the center of everything. His eyes settled on the spot where the panel lay hidden again, then shifted to Milo, then back. "All right," he said quietly. He moved fast now, with purpose. He dragged the bench, slow, controlled, keeping the noise minimal, until it angled toward the door instead of the wall. Not blocking it, just changing the line. Better position. He shifted the duffel closer, opened it. Inventory. Flashlight. Knife. Kit. Spare clothes. Limited, but enough. He pulled out a length of cord, thin but strong. Moved to the door. Tied one end to the handle, and the other to a support beam beside the wall. Not tight enough to stop it from opening, but enough to give resistance. Warning. Time. He stepped back, checked the angle. Good. Then, to the windows. He adjusted the loose boards again, this time securing one with a wedge of broken wood so it wouldn't shift easily. Not perfect, but better. Milo watched him through all of it, head lifted, eyes tracking. Ray moved back to him, crouched again. The dog shifted slightly, pushing himself up just enough to sit. "Stay down," Ray said, softer now. Milo hesitated, then lowered again. Ray's hand rested briefly on his shoulder, just above the bandage. "Did good," he said. No praise in the tone, just fact. Milo's tail moved once against the floor. Ray stood, crossed back to the bench. The box was still there. The envelope, the watch, the flag. He looked at them differently now, not as something found, as something that needed to be moved, protected, hidden better. He picked up the box, waited again, then looked at the floor. No. Too obvious now. They knew the spot. He scanned the room again. Angles, possibilities. Then his eyes landed on the stove. The base, heavy, solid, unlikely to be disturbed. He moved to it, knelt, checked underneath. Enough space. He shifted the box there, pushing it back, just out of immediate view. Not perfect, but it would do for now. The envelope went with it. The watch, he hesitated, then slipped it into his jacket pocket instead. Closer. The flag. He lifted it again, hands careful. This time he didn't set it down. He carried it to the bench, placed it beside where he had been sitting, which was within reach. The depot settled again. Different now. Not abandoned, not waiting, occupied, held. Ray sat, back to the wall again, but not the same wall as before. This time his line of sight covered both doors, both windows, and the center of the room. Milo shifted slightly, repositioning so he faced the opposite angle. Not commanded, not discussed, just aligned. Ray noticed. Of course he did. A faint exhale left him, not quite a sigh, close. The hours moved slowly after that. No more footsteps. No more attempts. Just the long stretch of night that followed something violent and waited to see if it would return. At some point, the wind died down completely. The silence that followed was thicker than before, deeper. Ray's eyes stayed open, but his breathing changed. Slower, more even. Not sleep, but something close to rest. The kind of rest that came when the body stopped fighting the moment and simply held it. Milo's head lowered gradually until it rested against his paws. Still awake, still aware, but conserving. Outside the basin held nothing. Inside the depot held two things. A man who had nowhere else to go, and something that had already proven it was worth coming back for. Ray's hand rested lightly against the edge of the bench, fingers still, but ready. Morning would come, and when it did, he would move, not away, forward. Because whatever had been left here wasn't just a gift, it was a line. And he wasn't stepping back from it. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It came in layers. First, a faint gray through the broken window, then a slow lifting of shadow along the floor, then the edges of things, bench, stove, walls, returning piece by piece as if the room was remembering itself. Ray was already awake. He hadn't moved much. Same position, same line of sight, but something in him had shifted overnight. Less reactive, more set. Milo stirred first, a small shift of weight, a quiet exhale. Then his head lifted, eyes scanning the room before settling on Ray. Ray nodded once. Easy. He stood slowly, joints stiff but controlled, and crossed to the door. He didn't open it right away, just rested his hand against it, feeling for anything beyond the wood. Nothing. He cracked it open. Cold air slipped in, cleaner than the day before. The wind had died down overnight, leaving the basin still. Ray stepped out, boots on wood, then dirt. He moved straight to the ground where the footprints had been. They were fading now, edges softened, details lost, time doing its work. Ray crouched anyway, studied what remained, angle of approach, distance between steps. Weight distribution. One of them had favored his right leg, subtle, but there. Injury? Habit? Something else? Ray filed it away. He stood and turned in a slow circle, scanning the perimeter again. Still nothing. No return. Not yet. He went back inside. Closed the door. Latched it. Milo had moved to the center of the room again. But this time he wasn't fixed on the floor. He was watching Ray. Waiting. Ray crossed to the stove. Knelt. Reached underneath. Pulled the box back out. Set it on the bench. The envelope followed. The weight of it all felt different now. Not just because of what it was, because of what it meant. Ray opened the box again. Same contents. Same order. Nothing disturbed. He picked up one bundle of bills, turned it over in his hand. The bills were older than anything still in circulation. Edges worn but preserved. He set it down. Reached for the envelope. Opened it again. Read the letter a second time. Slower now. Each line settling deeper. Thomas Hale. A man who had come back from war and chosen not to go back into the world. A man who had stayed in a place like this, not because he had to, because he couldn't go anywhere else. Ray's jaw tightened slightly, not from anger, from recognition. He folded the letter again. Careful. Exact. Set it down. Then he reached into the box again. Beneath the money, there was something he hadn't paid enough attention to the first time. Paper. Not folded like the letter. Stacked. Thin. He lifted them out. Documents. Certificates. Old. Official. His eyes moved across the first one. Numbers. Dates. Names. He didn't rush. Didn't assume. He read. Once. Then again. The numbers didn't change. Didn't shrink. Didn't make more sense the second time. They just were. Ray sat back slightly. His hands rested on his thighs. Still, the kind of stillness that comes when something lands too big to react to right away. Milo shifted closer, rested his head against Ray's leg again. Ray didn't move. Didn't speak. The room held quiet around them. The fire hadn't been lit yet. The cold sat heavy in the air. But Ray didn't seem to notice. His eyes moved back to the papers, to the figures, to the names tied to them. Assets. Accounts. Long untouched. Long waiting. He exhaled slowly. Not disbelief. Not excitement. Just processing. He reached down, picked up the watch again, turned it in his hand, opened it. The hands were still stopped. He pressed the crown gently. Nothing. Wound. Forgotten. He closed it, held it a second longer, then slipped it back into his pocket, close. The letter sat on the bench, the money in the box, the documents in his hand. Ray looked at all of it. Then at Milo. The dog looked back. No reaction. No expectation. Just presence. Ray nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. Not to the dog. Not to the room. To something else. He gathered the papers, stacked them, placed them back in the box, closed the lid. Not rushed, not hesitant. Simply done. He stood, walked to the door, opened it again. The basin stretched out the same as before. Empty, still, but different now. As Ray stepped onto the platform, the cold air hit his face. He didn't react. His eyes moved across the land, measuring, thinking, not about leaving, about staying, about what this place had been and what it was now. He turned back inside, looked at the depot, at the bench, at the stove, at the floor, at Milo, then back to the door. They'll come again, he said quietly. Milo didn't move. Ray stepped back inside, closed the door. This time, when the latch clicked, it didn't sound like something shutting him in. It sounded like something he was holding. The depot wasn't just shelter anymore. It wasn't just a place to stop. It was something that had been waiting for someone who understood it, for someone who wouldn't walk away from it. Ray moved back to the bench, sat, his posture steady, grounded, the kind that didn't come from comfort, the kind that came from knowing exactly where you stood. And for the first time since the night on the porch, Ray Collins wasn't looking for somewhere to go. He was deciding what to do with what he'd found. The decision didn't come all at once. It came in small, quiet pieces. Ray stood in the center of the depot, the morning light cutting across the floor in long, pale lines. Dust drifted through it, slow and steady, like time itself hadn't left, just paused. Milo moved first, not toward the door, not toward the floor, toward the bench. He rested his head beside the folded flag, careful without knowing why, then lowered himself onto the wood, eyes lifting toward Ray, waiting. Ray watched him for a second, then nodded. Yeah, he said, that was enough. And the work started that day. Not big changes, not all at once, just the kind that held. He cleared the floor first, swept the dust out in slow passes, pushing it toward the door and out onto the platform. The sound of the broom against the boards was steady, rhythmic, predictable. Milo followed the movement with his eyes, occasionally shifting to stay out of the way, but never leaving the room. The broken window came next. Ray pulled the loose board free, measured it against the frame, adjusted it until it fit tighter. Not perfect, but stronger. He checked the stove again, cleaned out what was left, rebuilt the fire with better structure this time, smaller, hotter, controlled. The warmth spread differently now, more even, more reliable. Days passed, then more. The basin changed slowly as winter edged closer. The wind came and went. Frost settled deeper each morning. Ray worked through it all, not rushing, not wasting movement. Each fix had purpose. Each adjustment held. Milo healed slower. The wound closed, but the fur around it stayed uneven as it grew back. He moved carefully at first, favoring the shoulder, but he didn't stop. He stayed at the door more now, positioned just inside the threshold, watching, always watching. Ray noticed. Of course he did. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. The line had been drawn already. The night stayed quiet after that. No return, no footsteps in the dark. But Ray didn't let the silence fool him. He kept the door secured, kept the light low, kept his position where he could see everything that mattered. Weeks passed before the first person came. He was an older man on foot, his backpack worn thin at the straps. He walked the old rail line like it still meant something, boots following a path that hadn't carried a train in decades. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, saw the depot, hesitated. Ray watched from inside, didn't move right away. Milo stood, ears forward, body still. The man stepped closer, slow, not cautious, just unsure. Ray opened the door. The movement was enough. The man froze for a second, then raised a hand in a quiet greeting. Ray stepped out onto the platform. No weapon, no threat, just presence. The man nodded. Didn't expect anyone out here, he said. Ray didn't answer right away, just studied him. Posture, hands, eyes, no danger, just worn. Coffee's hot, Ray said finally. The man blinked once, then nodded. He stepped inside and sat on the bench. Milo watched him the whole time. Unmoving, Ray poured coffee from a dented metal pot into a mismatched cup and set it in front of him. The man wrapped his hands around it like it mattered more than the drink itself. Appreciate it, he said. Ray nodded once, didn't ask questions, didn't offer any. The man stayed a while, not talking much, just sitting, warming up. Then he left. Same way he came, quiet, no promises, no expectations. More came after that, not many, but enough. Hikers, lost travelers, people who had drifted too far from wherever they were supposed to be. Each one stopped the same way, saw the depot, hesitated, then stepped closer. Ray didn't turn it into anything formal. He didn't hang a sign at first. He didn't make it a business. He just kept the door unlocked, kept the fire going, kept the coffee hot, and let the place do what it had always done. Wait. The sign came later. A small piece of wood, hand-painted, simple. Whitlock stop. It hung beside the door. Nothing more. One afternoon, months after the first visitor, a truck appeared at the edge of the clearing. Ray saw it before it stopped. He was already standing by the door when the engine cut. Milo stood beside him. The driver stepped out slowly. Younger, mid, 30s, clean jacket, city shoes not made for dirt roads. He walked forward a few steps, stopped, looked at the depot, then at Ray. There was something in the way he held himself. Not fear, not uncertainty. Something closer to hesitation. Ray didn't move, didn't speak. The man took another step, then another, until he reached the platform. They were close enough now that Ray could see the lines around his eyes, familiar lines, even if the face wasn't. "Dad," the man said. Ray didn't react right away, didn't shift, didn't step forward. Milo glanced up at him once, and then back to the man. The silence held. Then Ray opened the door. Not wide, just enough. "There's coffee," he said. The man blinked, surprised. For a heartbeat, neither of them knew whether the open door was forgiveness or merely permission to try. Then he nodded slowly and stepped inside. Sat on the bench, hands resting on his knees like he didn't know where else to put them. Ray poured a cup, set it down in front of him, the same way he had for everyone else. No more. No less. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The man stayed a while, then stood. "Place looks good," he said. Ray nodded once. The man hesitated at the door, like he wanted to say something else, then didn't. He stepped outside, walked back to the truck, drove away. Ray watched until the vehicle disappeared beyond the ridge. Then he turned back inside, closed the door. Milo moved to the entrance again, lay down, head resting just above his paws. Watching, Ray sat on the bench, the flag beside him, the watch in his pocket, the fire steady, the light soft. Outside, the old rail line stretched out into the distance, empty, but not forgotten. Ray leaned back slightly, his posture settling into something that hadn't existed before. Not survival, not waiting, something else. Milo shifted, resting his head against Ray's boot. The contact was light, but constant. Ray didn't move, didn't need to. Some places weren't meant for trains anymore. Some places weren't meant for people passing through. Some places just waited, and when the right person finally stepped into them, they didn't ask questions. They didn't demand anything. They just held the door open. And maybe that's all any of us are really looking for. A place that doesn't push us away. A place that doesn't ask too many questions. A place that simply says, "You can stay." If this story meant something to you, I want to hear it. You don't have to write a long comment. Just type 1 if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, or type 0 if you think some doors, once closed, should stay closed. And if you've ever had a moment in your life that changed everything, just write here so we know you're still standing. Make sure you subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories about quiet strength, second chances, and the places that wait for the right person to arrive. There's another story waiting for you right now. We'll see you there.